our scrolls, I'm laughing because my Ranger beret was a Vietnamese one that I looked like poppin' fresh doughboy. I couldn't wear it correctly. It didn't have that right swag angle. So
I think you used the term in your book, Craig. He looks like the Pillsbury doughboy turned Paris pimp. Was that?
It was. Yeah, it was. It's one of those things you look at. It's like, oh my God. You look at the photos now, we kind of laugh, But we had some really good people in the company. George Passarelli, the company commander, was a former SAW guy. And you had First Sergeant Aaron, who was really good. Passarelli was replaced by, Captain Griffiths. And I think he was a SAW helicopter pilot guy. So you had a cadre of people that were phenomenal special forces, Ranger big brothers that, really just good folks and really looked after us. We had 2 platoons in the unit. Operationally, I think we probably had 6 or 7 teams at any one time. And that just depended on were people sick, were people wounded, were people on leave. Sometimes you'd fill out another team. But I was lucky to have some really talented team leaders, and that paid off. That paid off later.
To walk this back just a little bit for folks. As I recall, there were sort of 3 incarnations of this during the war, right? There's the long-range patrols, long-range reconnaissance patrols, and then ranger companies. And
yeah.
This is 67, 68. Where in that trajectory were you? What were these units when you arrived? And where were you? And what company was this?
Sure, you bet. It was 1969, and it was the Hotel Company 75th Infantry Ranger, attached to the 1st Air Cavalry Division, and then the headquarters, our company was located at Camp Corvette at Phuc Vinh, Vietnam. 3 Corps. Down in 3 Corps, I think most of our missions were mostly jungle related along the border, and it was one of the main infiltration routes from the Ho Chi Minh Trail, if you will.
Tell folks a little bit about this, what ranger companies were doing when you arrived. What was this mission? Because it's fairly unique.
It was. They started off as reconnaissance where, the
Gabapentin is bringing you closer to amputation. These are 3 symptoms that are signaling that you could be close to losing your foot. I'm going to show you the critical signs, why it happens, and what you can do about it. This video could save your...
The early guys would go out and they would, just sneak and peek. They would look for Viet Cong units, they would look for North Vietnamese units, they would gather up as much critical data and information as they could. Then, without being seen, they would end up being, exfiltrated maybe 5-6 days later. They would pass along that information to command. By 1968, it began to be long-range reconnaissance, patrol, and ambush. Could you ambush smaller units? And then things like snatch missions, tapping into enemy lines that you find out there, planting intelligence material that was detrimental to the North Vietnamese. It could be, most of the time it was ambush. You go plant your claymores, you wait for a small unit that wouldn't overrun you, and then you try to capture a POW, and you wanted a POW. A POW, there was a company policy that for every prisoner of war that you brought back, you'd get a 2-day in-country R&R. So, it's like, don't kill them. Let's go capture as many of these guys as we can.
Yeah.
The trouble is, when you're out with 5 to 6 people, when you're sneaking and peeking, it's all good when nobody knows you're there. When you're found out, you probably have 15 to 20 minutes, and if you don't get help, a gunship or something out immediately, then you're going to start taking your hits. And at times we took some heavy hits.
Yeah. Tell us about your first patrol.
First patrols are wonderful because you're afraid of everything. The dark scares you. You get out into the jungle and it's so dark at night, you can barely see your hand in front of your face. I had one team leader that says, okay, we found a trail that had some good sign on it, sign being footprints, blueprints, bicycle tracks. Because those bicycles to haul in mortars, rock rockets and God knows whatever. So you set off the trail. You move off the trail maybe 10 yards. You go plant some claymores and put them at angles because, that 100-yard distance that you're taught in basic training and AIT to blow a claymore doesn't apply in combat in the jungle. You have to be able to see your claymores, and you have to be able to make sure they're not going to be turned around on you. So you plant your claymores, and then you'd wait to see who walked by. And then the team leader would make the judgment, does he blow the claymores? Do you initiate the contact, or is this a point element?
Right.
Is this a 10-man point element for a 200-man unit?
Right.
Now, saying that, before our first mission, one of my buddies who I graduated with, he was put on a team that very night at graduation. They went in at sunset, and this was prior to, I think, Fire Sport Base Buttons getting attacked. And they counted 300 North Vietnamese go by their position. 300. Which, of course, nobody believes. You think that's nonsense. Now, I spoke with my platoon leader, Mike Brennan, and he was at the Ranger 50th anniversary as well. Mike is a wonderful guy. Mike took that information up to command. Command said, well, we don't know what to believe on that. The colonel ended up taking it to the general. The general says, well, if my alert says it's true, then we're going to plan for it. So they planned for it. They got, I think they got the artillery pieces down, lowered. They had gunships already. And sure enough, pre-dawn attack, Far Sport Base guns got hit, and hundreds of North Vietnamese were dead in the wire.
Wow.
So that gave you immediate credibility.
Right.
It also scared the hell out of you to know that this guy's very first graduation is that night that he had 300 North Vietnamese go by him 10 yards away.
And that incident's fictionalized in your book.
Yeah, it's, with fiction you can write more truth than you can with nonfiction. I can't remember. I thought it was a good friend of mine who told me, he says, hey, if you want to write some truth, write fiction. I said, why? He says, because if you call somebody a son of a bitch in a nonfiction book, you can get sued. Whereas you call somebody a son of a bitch in fiction, and hey, it's just fiction, and also fiction allows for creativity, for correcting all the mistakes that you saw or that you did.
On my back.
I don't want to pretend I'm anything other than
Said
a
fucking
road
heavy
ranger.
snow
One time,
today.
I was a squad leader in a recon platoon in the first of the
Said
night
that like
as well.
fluffy shit.
And by the way, the first of the night was the recon element for the 1st Cavalry Division.
Oh god.
The 1st of the 9th Squadron had 4 troops, A Troop, B, C, and D. A,
I
B,
don't
and
fire up my
C were
snowblower
aerial
at 3
rifle.
o'clock in the morning, so I shoveled.
Really aerial rifle. You had one platoon of scout helicopters, the Lowbirds. You had one platoon of Louis lift ships and crew. You had one platoon of gunships, and you had one platoon of infantry. We were called the Blues. And our job was recon, air crew rescue, and QRF. And that was every day you're out there, for a shot down helicopter. Every day you're out there for doing a QRF on an alert team that may need it, which came in handy later when we went in for a team for Cambodia.
So tell us your first mission.
First mission. I was so scared. I think I got stuck as a medic, and you were the medic because you had to carry an extra heavy weight of the medic bag, and you have about 90 pounds on your back. You can't really stand up too straight. You're carrying an extra battery for the radio, your PRC-25. You'd be lucky if it gets 3 miles. You're carrying all your rations, your water, ammunition, so you set up for the night. You set up in a wagon wheel perimeter, 5 or 6 guys. I think I was on a 6-man team, the first one. You're sitting back to back, and as the sun is going down, the jungle is getting darker and darker, and you hear some weird sounds in the jungle. And team leader set us up near a bamboo clump. And I thought, man, this is great. Nobody can see us from the trail. We're well hidden. And then it suddenly occurred to me there was bamboo viper snakes in the bamboo. So I pulled out my knife, and I think I weed whacked the entire area the entire night. So anytime a leaf would blow and a shadow would move, I'd cut it. So the next morning, there was nothing but, probably 25 acres of cut up leaves. And being the new guy, I think I even woke the team up one night because of the gecko lizard we call the fuck you lizard. I don't know if you've ever heard of the lizard, but it's wonderful. It's called a fuck you lizard, and you heard about it, and you thought, oh, this is nuts. You know, there's no such thing. And there you are out in the jungle at night, and you hear, rock you. And I thought, well, that could be the girl I used to date, or that could be the Vietcong. And then how you woke up the person next to you, you squeeze their arm or squeeze their leg. You know, you pull a 2-hour guard during the night. So it was my turn to monitor the radio, and while the rest of the guys slept. And I woke everybody in the team off, you know, and I pointed to my ear, and I heard something. And then, of course, the team leader, all the team members are sitting up listening. They got their weapons. You know, their adrenaline is going a mile a minute. And then the lizard, of course, said, fuck you. And I said, yeah, that's it. And they all looked like they were going to gut me. And what little light there was, moonlight coming through, I thought they were going to gut me. And that turned out to be the lizard. So that was my first mission. So you're the new guy, you kill every leaf around you, and you wake the entire team up because of a gecko lizard. Nothing happened. That was the first picnic mission. You came back in, you're filthy, dirty, you're scummy. As a alert, you take nothing out with you but your rucksack, LBE, and weapon. You may have a small piece of towel that you put over your face for the millions of mosquitoes that you can play connect the dots on those bites the next morning. But after 5 or 6 days in the jungle, you stink, you smell. You come back in, you get a shower, and you're just, you know, re-up arm, get your backpack, get everything ready, and then wait until you get the next mission.
What was on average, the duration of these patrols?
5 to 6 days.
Okay.
5 to 6 days. It depends on, what they wanted. You know, sometimes it would be just right outside of Phu Vinh. Other times it would be up near the Dog's Head in Cambodia, which is surrounded 3 sides by Cambodia. Other times it would be up north near Bù Đao, up near the Cambodia area, Special Forces camps up there as well. But you just didn't know. Wherever until the G2 decided they wanted some information, you would go to that location. Helicopters would fly in. They do. I think Ken Miller was talking about it. They would do pretend drops, drop-offs. So they come down to one, natural clearing in the jungle. By the way, the natural clearings are actually sumps. During the dry season, they're dry. During the rainy season, it will fill up with water. So helicopters would come in low, pretend to land, take off again, make another false insertion, and then drop you off. You may have 10 seconds to unask the helicopter. So, boom, you're off the helicopter. Team leader is racing you into the jungle, 10 to 15 yards into the jungle. He'll do a button hook move, he'll come back about 10 yards, and you will cover your own trail that you made, and then wait, and you call it laying dog. You would lay there and just wait to see were the Viet Cong there, were they following you, was anybody on your trail, and if so, you could ambush them because they would be following the trail that 5 or 6 of you made. Now, when 5 or 6 of you with rucksacks are going through a jungle, you leave a big trail. And if you're doing it at dawn, you also leave a dewdrop trail on the grass in the landing zone because the grass will bend over and the dewdrops will just dissipate, and it's like a big green ribbon. So it gives you your direction of movement. If it's a wet LZ and you're going in and it's mud, well, you leave a lot of muddy footprints going through. So most of the time, you could infiltrate. You get in, and then you just, the team leader, you would have over your next 4 to 5 days a grid map, and you had to search every part of that 4-grid area and to make sure that what people thought was there either was there or wasn't there. And that was the value of alert ranger teams. The military at the time was using, I think, what they call the pile-on effect. You send in a small alert team, 5 guys, to see if there's anything there. If they find something, you bring in a platoon. If it's too much for the platoon, you bring in a company. If it's too much for a company, you bring in a battalion. So, but if it's nothing there, you don't have to send in a battalion. You don't have to send in a company. That's you send in a company, you're taking up a lot of helicopters. You're using 100 and something men to, which by the way can't be quiet.
Right. Yeah.
That's the most difficult thing, I think, is I felt sorry for the grunts because there were some of the grunts that would make so much noise, scream out, hey, who's got a cigarette or whatever. And you felt sorry for the guys who were really just were doing their best to be quiet and run a good operation. And as I said, 100 people, the Viet Cong would know where they were, so they start probing them or they start hitting them. But the small team, nobody's really sure where you are, as long as you're quiet. So
I think that, I've been reading about WERPs and thankfully interviewing some of you guys as an adult, but I've been reading about you guys since I was a teenager myself. And it's shocking to me that there hasn't to this day been like a real a movie or a television series about you guys. I mean, just 5 or 6 guys in tiger stripes out by themselves in the jungle doing these patrols. I mean, it's hair-raising stuff, and it's incredible. And you were all very young too.
I think I was more afraid of acne than I was of Vietnam. Because I wasn't knowledgeable enough yet to be afraid of the Viet Cong or the North Vietnamese. We were young. I mean, I was a sergeant at 19.
Yeah.
So, by the way, when you get to a ranger, when you got the ranger company, your rank didn't matter. You go through the training when you're assigned to a team. I had one Spec 4 E4 team leader, and the first thing they tell you is that you're not the leader. And I went, fine by me. My goal was to learn as much as I can and try to be a good team member. I just wanted to contribute to the team and try to do a good job. And so I had a great team leader later on, a guy named Jim McIntyre. Jim died, by the way, he passed away. I think he had an aneurysm in 1994 in his 40s. Wonderful, wonderful, brave guy. In fact, I want to tell you a little bit about him if I can, if you'll let me.
Yeah, please.
Okay, Jim, he was a private on a team. When a team got in contact, one of the guys, Rick Arden, who was a ranger who told me the story, said that they were getting ready to toss a grenade out. Well, throwing grenades in jungle is really difficult because there's so much stuff and they bounce back. And the grenade fell back within the team. And Jim McIntyre, his PFC, saw it, threw his rucksack on the grenade and jumped on the rucksack, or angled it enough that when it exploded, he went up, came back down. He was not, the guys were lightly wounded, but he didn't die.
Wow.
He got an Impact Silver Star from General Roberts on the spot. He was promoted to Sergeant E5 on the spot. He was a natural woodsman. I mean, the guy was just really good in the field. He's from upstate New York, and he was just a good woodsman. A lot of the guys weren't. You have to remember, guys from Chicago, inner city, guys from, maybe Boston, inner city, maybe Miami, inner city. Brave guys, but they never had any time in woods or out, anything, that resembled the jungle. So these guys would, wake you up in the middle of the night and say, what's that? I say, well, it's a bird, But the city boys, I grew up a lot in the countryside, so I had a lot of fun playing in the woods, and used to play in the swamps in Florida, and I probably made a lot of rafts and never floated too well, and finally actually got one where we would catch snakes, but we would camp out for the weekend, so the jungle didn't scare me as much as I said acne did. But getting back to Jim, his one of the missions that followed, he was on a team. They were getting pulled out, infiltrated out. The helicopter crashed going out of the LZ, and so a couple of guys were wounded. He went into this fire sport base called Becky, and Becky proves to be an interesting story. A lot of the team members were medevaced out. He was going to be pulled out the next day. Well, that night, Becky gets overrun, and fire sport base Becky got overrun. I think they destroyed a lot of the artillery, hand-to-hand fighting. So Jim was involved in that on his on one of the follow-up missions. So here's a guy that is in the thick of it and has a sense and smarts enough to really take the fight to the enemy. Then the mission that I was on Jim's team, we got hit by 45 North Vietnamese. 2 of our guys were killed. 3rd one was shot up badly. And Mac was taking the fire to the NVA coming in at us, and he was telling us to fire he didn't know the other guys had got shot and killed and badly wounded. And he turned around and his jaw kind of dropped, and he got me to fire at a 180. And you're doing a 180 to keep the North Vietnamese from coming in from around you. And then he was just taking the fight to end. We would fight with every weapon we had. We sometimes would carry an M79 grenade launcher besides our M16. We had an M14 automatic that would sounded like an M60 when it's fired. I think Jim had a Car 15 at the time. So we were tossing grenades and we were firing everything we could. We found out a QRF couldn't come in for us. And this is in Song Bay, right outside of Fire Sport Base Buttons. So the QRF that was supposed to come in for us couldn't. They were off doing something else, and we were told to leave our dead and then E&E off to this clearing where we would get picked up. Well, Jim kind of turned around and looked at me, and he says, "We're not leaving our dead," and I nodded. And I thought that was the bravest thing I've ever heard anybody say. It was also the most frightening thing, because we would, you're kind of manning the radio, and I was giving the radio to one of the wounded guys, horribly wounded. The poor kid had probably, his legs, both legs were shattered at the thigh, and you're trying to fire, you're trying to pull the other people back to safety, and you never feel more useless where you can't help these wounded guys because you have to set up the perimeter to keep the, and we're talking 10 yards away. They kept probing at us, coming in at us and firing. Luckily, I think we were down behind a tree and the other guys weren't. But that was Jim. And Jim, by the way, the QRF that came for us came from Mike Brennan, Staff Sergeant Ernest Bolstarge, Sergeant Charlie Ochoa, and a whole Greenlee, and a whole bunch of these guys from our Ranger company that got a helicopter to fly way the hell out to Song Bay where we were. They were going to repel in for us. But by that time, the medevac came in. Gunships came all around us and gave us a 360 fire. We sent our wounded guy up first. We sent the two bodies up. Max sent me up, and then he got pulled up. So that's the type of Rangers we got to work with, were guys who would put their life on the line to help you. And then the team leader like Jim McIntyre, who was probably, as I said, he was the real John Wayne. He was a genuine hero.
Yeah.
I was lucky enough to have been on the team with him.
Yeah.
Come back in and turns out I got malaria on that mission, so now I'm in the hospital. So my 140 pounds dropped down to 135, I think. I spent about 2 to 3 weeks in the hospital, and I come back and I think they were concerned about me. I got called up to squadron to be the squadron commander's jeep driver, and I turned them down, and I said I'll volunteer to go up to Apache troop, and I didn't know how to drive a stick. I was too embarrassed to say I couldn't drive a stick, so I turned down a safe jeep driving job, and I went up and volunteered for the recon platoon up in Apache troop, where some of our Rangers had gone to, because you get tired of going out with 5 guys. And our recon platoon up there, we had 23. We had 4 machine guns. Now, a platoon is only authorized 1 machine gun. But since our job was aircrew rescue, every time a helicopter got shot down, we would borrow an M16. So, and our platoon leader was a Special Forces Lieutenant Jack Hughley. He didn't care. The more firepower we had, the better. So our 23-man platoon had 4 M60 machine guns. All the gunners looked like Pancho Villa. Most of us carried an extra 100 rounds for the 60. And it came in really handy with firefights, and we got into a few. We got into a really bad one on March 19th. And we ran into a battalion.
Craig, I'm sorry to interrupt. I got to let Dave do a shout out to our other sponsor. We'll get right back to that one, okay?
And actually, before we go there, because I wanted to ask you a couple of questions about about the LRPs or about the recon missions. But real quick, thank you to our sponsor, Ghostbed. If you sleep hot at night, and many of us have, and I still do, I'm a hot sleeper, you know just how disruptive it can be. Whether you're having trouble falling, so whether you fit for your again, if you're not, mention when you guys operate.
You have to remember the first of the night that the 1st of the 9th Squadron owned the LRP company, they owned the Scout Dogs, they owned all the recon platoon, the recon element. 1st of the 9th was the recon element for the division. So typically, a pink team, a Lowbird, a OH-6 a Scout helicopter, and a gunship would go out first light, and they would go searching, looking in the jungle, and the Lowbird would be flying at treetop level, looking for trails, looking for bunker complexes, and if they spotted something, that would give them some intel to pass along to, your S2, your G2, God knows, but who knows what the finer minds were thinking.
Right.
But in theory, all that good intelligence would go back, and then they would designate missions or patrols from that. With a reconnaissance platoon, with Apache troop in Tayin, if our Lowbird spotted something that was active, our platoon would go in. And we went into many occupied bunker complexes. Because we were next to the border, the North Vietnamese would go across the border knowing that we couldn't chase them.
Right.
So we would follow up to the border and then be told, to stop. Sometimes they would get occupied and you'd be in a fight for your life. That we took some hits, and March 19th is the mission that I'll get to that a little bit later. But yeah, the intelligence, I believe, dictated the missions.
Yeah. Well, and I can't remember my other question now, but something just came up for me. When you were watching, based on the border issue in Vietnam, because it was a very real issue.
Oh yeah.
Based on that, when you were watching the war in Afghanistan unfold, and knowing that like a lot of the Taliban was coming across the border of Pakistan and then going back, what were your feelings about that?
I was so angry that I just felt so sorry for the Afghan vets, because I knew that what is Afghan, the empire of lost armies, that you knew that eventually they're going to be pulled out, and I just viewed it as a desert version of what Vietnam was, and my daughter spent 20 years in the Air Force, and she was in Special Operations Intelligence. And every time she was in Afghanistan, Iraq, or Syria, I would go nuts. It's I have nothing but immense respect for the veterans of Afghanistan and Iraq and elsewhere, the other places that they go to, because I think nobody appreciates the military until the barbarians are at the gate.
Right.
And I didn't like the pullout of Afghanistan. That made me cry. It just reminded me so much of Vietnam.
Yeah.
That we left so many good, great people behind, and cut it and run, if you will.
Yeah.
And it's and I've spoken to some Afghan vets, and you guys got my admiration and respect, because that's, as I said, I think that was a desert version of what we went through in Vietnam.
Yeah, and it's interesting that it played out in so many ways. It played out the same, and that somehow borders tend to be our kryptonite. Like the enemy is always, safe across the border.
Yeah, it's like a bad game of tag.
Yeah.
Suddenly it's like, oh, you're out of bounds. They don't count. And you can see them over there. When we went into Cambodia in the summer of 1970, we found huge bunker complexes. I mean, there was a COSVID headquarters. We came back with, tons of equipment and whatnot. So we knew where they were.
Yeah.
And SOG had told us, SOG had so much information, and they were wonderful about what they passed along. However, politics played a big deal into all of our wars.
Yeah. And
so the politicians defined where we could go, where we couldn't go, the rules of engagement. Wars have to be, I think was it Sherman who said the war has to be held, otherwise it will just keep going on and on, that type of thing.
Yeah.
If you don't fight it and end it quickly, then it becomes just a horrible, horrible thing.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and that reminds me of my second question, actually, is, you guys are going out, like you mentioned, sometimes you were going near other, fire bases or other people's areas. How were you guys managing, the battle space deconfliction to ensure that you weren't, blue-on-blue engagements weren't happening?
Hopefully that the information, like you had a relay, we call it an X-ray. The X-ray the relay station would either be up in Nui Din Mountain, or sometimes they'd be out at Fire Sport Base, and they would let the Fire Sport Base know exactly where your locations were. You had to, you had to make your check-ins every hour to let people know where you were. And there were some blue on blue. There was those attacks. I think some teams got hit by roving gunship patrols. I don't think I was never part of a patrol that got hit by anything else. More often than not, it was just Viet Cong and North Vietnamese backyards. Yeah, I mean it's all their playground. It's their bunkers. It's their fighting position. It's their machine gun pit. You're finding dropped equipment. So you know they're there. It's a question of, do they know that you're there? With the recon platoon, it became a little bit easier because we had gunship. It's so much easier to sneak into a bunker complex when you have a low bird flying at treetop level making noise. So Ed Beal and I were the point man for the recon platoon, and Ed, by the way, was another hotel company ranger. And we got treated really well up at Apache Troop. Some of the LERPs up there, the former LERPs and Rangers, they said, hey, come on up, we'll give you a steak. Oh, by the way, here's a glass of whiskey. It's like, we can eat well. And Apache Troop, we only went out during the day. We never went out at night. Sullivan went out on a night patrol. So you would go out for a day mission. You may go out 2 missions at a day. A helicopter may get shot down. You're called in to go in and rescue the crew or bring out the dead and survivors. Then you're called in to check out a bunker complex that a LERP team or one of the low birds had found. But when the low bird is flying at treetop level, you're 23 people on the ground can make a lot of noise, and the North Vietnamese hiding in the bunkers can't hear you.
Yeah. Well, so on these rescue, and on these down pilot or these down helicopter rescue missions, I imagine sometimes it was a race.
It was, yeah, it was a race. Sadly, when a helicopter goes down in the jungle, there's not much left. If they're lucky enough to maybe crash into well, not even lucky. I mean, if they can make it to a clearing of some sort, but helicopters not made. They're not made for take tumbles and rolls. We found one helicopter, a missing gunship that it went lost for a year, that went upside down and crashed through the trees, and we found the pilot impaled with a tree, and the front gunner, part of his bones were inside the helicopter, and part of his bones had been dragged away by animals. So that helicopter was missing for a year before we actually found it in the jungle. So what we did is we pulled the remains out, and their wallets were still there. Everything was intact. Their pistols were still there. The ammunition in the Cobra gunship was fresh and clean. So we pulled out as much of the ammo as we could, and then we would plant C4 on it. We would be given the order to destroy it in place. So Ed Beal and I became some good and bad bomb makers. We once blew up a North Vietnamese fish farm, and I think if you talk to any of the Blues or any of the crew members, helicopter crew afterwards, they'll probably swear when they hear our names. We found a North Vietnamese bunker. It was a fish farm covered by trees, fed by water. Thousands of these little fish, and it was their 7-Eleven for fish, if you will. And the lieutenant said we should destroy it, or we got the order to destroy it. So Ed Beal and I said, we can make a bomb. So I think we used a pound of C4, 2 pounds of C4, dead cord. We set the thing off. Picture a mushroom cloud of mud and fish going up in the air. Now picture that mushroom cloud of fish and mud falling all over the platoon and into the trees, and everybody was covered in fish guts. So all you heard was a collective son of a bitch. Then, of course, when the helicopters come to pull you out, you're stinking of fish guts. They have to wash out and clean their helicopters, so the crew chief and everybody's mad at you. So, and sometimes we made some good bombs that destroyed stuff. Sometimes you just wish you had, YouTube available back then, because everybody would have laughed their butts off.
Craig, before I interrupted you, it sounded like you wanted to tell a story about that recon platoon going into a hairy mission. Was there something you wanted to return to there?
Yeah, it's that's a day I think all of us believe we should have died. That we were sent into a place called the Dog's Head. Now, if you're not familiar with the Dog's Head, you guys, are you familiar with Fire Support Base Illingsworth? Do you know of the story or the book?
Honestly, no, not offhand.
I'm not. Okay. I'll preface it. March 19th, we got an order, we got a briefing to go into the Dog's Head. Dog's Head is upper left corner of the Vietnam map of Tay Ninh province. It looks like a K9 profile. It is surrounded three sides by Cambodia.
Was that the area that was known as Fishhook?
It was right near the fish hook.
Okay.
The fish hook and the Dog's Head, yeah, very close, very close. And it was just the main off-ramp for the Ho Chi Minh Trail, if you will. As soon as we land in the clearing, 3 helicopters go in. Our platoon gets off. We have 23 guys. There's a trench line all around the landing zone, and there are 51 caliber pits. No weapons, but the pits themselves and a trench line. So Ed Beal and I look at each other. We're going, okay. Luckily, we had a South Vietnamese scout too. It was very good. And our South Vietnamese scout, we're looking around. We're seeing footprints everywhere, fresh boot prints, the North Vietnamese tennis shoe type print. Not to mention the Ho Chi sandal tire treads. And, you know, the Vietnamese scout looks at us. He says, they're here. We went, oh, okay. Ed tries to convince our lieutenant to leave he and I behind inside the jungle line so that when the platoon starts moving out, we'll ambush the guys we know are going to come in behind us. And lieutenant says, no, I don't want to break up the platoon. We need you guys. So we moved back into our squads. I was squad leader. Ed and I normally walk point. They had a different guy walking the point at that time, a guy named Dennis Henderson. We started walking. Oh, no, this is the 19th. I'm sorry. I'm getting that confused with 1 week later. But we start moving inside. We're finding fighting positions. We're fighting bamboo camps. We're fighting helicopters made out of bamboo. And they would teach their people where to shoot a helicopter. We're finding wooden RPGs. It's a training camp, training area. So we move further in the bunker, and you're checking out as many of these bunkers as you can. Now picture dozens and dozens and dozens of bunkers and fighting positions. Underground, covered with logs, with a trail system. And it's all in trees, by the way. So this is all in the jungle. So it can't be seen really from the air. You got a double canopy covering most of it. And there's fire pits, there's stuff everywhere. And we're finding fresh rice, dropped equipment. It's like, okay, did they go run across the border like they normally do? So we had the low bird break away. So when the low bird broke away, we started hearing Vietnamese talking. And it was like, it's not a good sign. So it's like, okay, get all your people, get all your people ready for something. You're not sure what. We go check out the newest bunkers, don't find anything. So it's like, is it our imagination?
Let my dog out.
So I walk up to my Vietnamese